based on the totality of scientific evidence available, do the benefits of the Pfizer BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine outweigh its risks for use in individuals 16 years of age and older? Okay. Amanda, are you asking to be recognized again? Or is
yes,
this the
thank
old
you.
one?
Nope, this is a new one. I got my hand up quickly this time.
Okay, let's start with you.
I just wanted to comment that I do believe that the benefits outweigh the risks. I think that some language that I would prefer be added to this language is based on the totality of scientific evidence available at this time. And I do want to ask FDA to comment on potential other contraindications besides history of anaphylaxis to a vaccine, or warnings such as persons with a history of Bell's palsy or other things that they are including in the considerations of use.
FDA, Marion, Bill, Doron.
Hi. So this voting question is what we would like the committee to consider at this time, which is an all-inclusive authorization for ages 16 and above. If the committee has concerns that the benefit-risk balance is not able to be assessed or unfavorable, such that it would preclude inclusion of a specific subgroup, then clearly we would want to hear about that and would consider those recommendations in contraindications or in the parameters of the population authorized for use.
The question is about groups within this 16 years of age and older, such as with some kind of underlying condition. Is that usually handled by FDA with information, warnings, labels, or something like that?
Well, it depends on what the reason for concern is. So if there is a clear risk of that would make the benefit-risk balance so unfavorable that persons in that group should never be vaccinated, then that would be a contraindication. For lesser concerns, then that might merit a warning or a precaution.
Right. Is that usually something that is voted on by an advisory committee? Those specifics.
Typically, no. Those are handled through labeling.
Right. Okay. Let's go on to next, Mr. Taubman.
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to ask the committee or the other members to listen to this. I'm a consumer rep, so maybe I'm a good indicator of how things are perceived by the public, but I have spent a lot of time reviewing the material, trying to understand the data, and in light of concerns with the data expressed by my colleagues, many commentators, and in the literature, I do have a compromise proposal that's not the whole thing that was just suggested or is in the question, but rather it would be that EUA be limited to the groups that the CDC's ACIP committee has already identified as priority. And the data is limited, as we know. It's limited in so many ways. The severe disease thing that I was talking about before, it's not compelling at all. I mean, FDA says all we can do is suggest protection from severe COVID-19 disease. We need to know that it does that. So that's one bit of data we need to get. The safety issues are only 2 months of data, and I know it's been said many times that 6 weeks is usually the amount of time before we have a problem, but this is a completely untested technology with this vaccine in humans. And then FDA says as far as a vaccine-enhanced disease over time, that's unknown. So there's a few of the missing piece of data. Given that we don't have good data on effectiveness on the thing that really matters, which is preventing severe disease, and the safety issues, and that there's a question of duration of protection, which more time would give us, I think that we absolutely need, as other people have said, phase 2 to 3 trials to continue. And we've also discussed at length how if you grant EUA broadly, then it's going to really present a problem. I know that there's workarounds, and I understand it makes sense. The blinded crossover, you still are going to lose at that point thereafter the placebo benefit. It's been suggested by Pfizer and others that we can go with the standard that wait until the people in the study will only be told and unblinded or offered the crossover option if it is authorized for their particular demographic to get the vaccine at that point. But what's been talked about is state and local standards. And as Dr. Lee pointed out, that is really problematic and variable. And I can tell you as an advocate on the state level, we can lobby successfully to get things changed on the state level. And maybe that's not so good. Maybe you need a clear standard of EUA. And as I pointed out earlier, a lot of the trial participants who are writing to us and complaining are viewing if EUA is granted, and that means I should get it. We can disagree with that. But clearly, if EUA is officially granted initially only for the 2 high-risk groups, which is identified by the CDC, which was healthcare workers and the nursing home residents to start, that will give us time, give FDA time to review more thoroughly the data. It can be just a few weeks. And they could either come back to this committee or on their own decide, okay, we now have enough to go forward and expand it to a larger population. And the reason I'm suggesting it is obviously because the risk-benefit analysis changes, and you're talking about the high-risk populations versus the rest, given all the uncertainty. And the other piece of it is that we know there's just not enough to go around. So even if you agree to what I'm saying, it makes no difference in terms of what's going to happen on the ground in terms of getting vaccine out, because it's only going to go initially to the healthcare workers and the nursing home residents anyway. But the reason why I think it's important is that it will allow FDA the opportunity to get real data. I did ask for the data since November 14th to today just on severe disease. We know there were only 10 cases before November 14th, and I couldn't get, when I asked, more recent data. I'm sure Pfizer today, right now, knows how many severe cases there were since November 14th in both groups. But that's the kind of data we really need to see, I think, and that's why I'm suggesting it.
Boron?
Yeah, I'd like to make one point about this question of severe disease. I think it's important, and it was covered to some extent at the last VRBPAC meeting in October. And that's that we have ample experience of examples of vaccines that protect just as well, if not better, against severe disease as they do against mild to moderate disease. And so protection against disease of any severity is actually a pretty good predictor of protection against severe disease. We have a pretty strong result in terms of efficacy with this vaccine based on the available data. And those data that we do have for severe disease are all pointing in the right direction and corroborate what history has shown us. I think that's important to...
Not only that, as we will get more data as we start using the vaccine more extensively, because with rare outcomes, you have to start using the vaccine in order to see them under proper circumstances. I'd like to move on to Dr. Meisner, who's got the next question.
Thank you. I would like to concur with what Dr. Fink just said, that if a vaccine prevents mild disease, I think we can assume it will prevent severe disease. So I understand that's the most important endpoint, but because of the rarity of the disease, severe disease, it may be difficult to reach that. The other point I wanted to make about long-term safety. We know about the safety of this vaccine through 60 days. And it's pretty hard to think of a vaccine reaction that occurs after 60 days. And I looked through the vaccine injury table for conventional vaccines, and all of the injuries, except for one, were only up to 6 weeks, not even 8 weeks. The one exception was a polio vaccine, a live polio vaccine administered to an immunocompromised host, and this is obviously not a live vaccine. So I think we cannot, no one could say that there is no long-term enhanced immunity when the vaccinee experiences the vaccine. But to me, that I think the safety is pretty well demonstrated, and balance that against over 2,000 deaths a day or 2,500 deaths a day, I'm comfortable. I would, if I could make one more point, Arnold, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yes, I am uncomfortable about the question as it's written. I do not believe we have sufficient data for 16 and 17-year-olds. I would prefer to say for use in individuals 18 years of age and older. 16 and 17-year-old children, as we saw, or adolescents, do not get very sick, seldom get hospitalized, and I'll bet it's a very small number of deaths.
Bill, would you like to make a comment? And then I think we should talk about the 16 and 17-year-olds specifically. Bill?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a specific comment about vaccine safety and duration of follow-up, because I think one of the important things to remember when we're rolling out a vaccine to many people is that it's not just the side effects that the vaccine is causing that are important, but it may also be the vaccine side effects that are attributed to vaccine, but which the vaccine didn't actually cause, that are important. And that's one of the reasons why we typically do follow people in clinical trials for 6 months or more, and where that placebo-controlled follow-up can be very important in showing that whatever happened in the vaccine group also happened in the placebo group, because that's our best way of knowing. And very often it's the fact that we have that placebo-controlled follow-up over time that gives us the ability to say that the vaccine didn't cause something at a longer period of time after vaccination. One could in fact argue that one could even get more placebo-controlled safety follow-up over the shorter run, which then could expand the total safety database. This was proposed at a WHO meeting a few weeks ago, where as long as vaccine supplies are limited, there shouldn't be a prohibition against getting additional placebo-controlled follow-up in people who don't have immediate eligibility for vaccine, and that then could expand the safety database to a much larger number than even what one is capable of doing in these trials. But very often these kinds of studies work very much to the benefit of the manufacturers, because if one has this data, it actually allows one to say fairly definitively that a side effect that somebody thinks the vaccine is causing is not being caused by the vaccine. And of course, this is something that is a big concern with rapid rollout of a vaccine. This kind of thing caused big problems in 1975, 1976. The swine flu vaccine, where there were rapid cases of Guillain-Barré syndrome, where if there were more placebo-controlled data, one might even have been able to address that at a different level, although that would have required very many patients. But I'm just pointing out that it's not just the 2 months follow-up in these phase 3 trials, which are important, but really placebo-controlled safety follow-up can play a big role in helping us determine what the vaccine doesn't cause, which is often at least as important as our ability to determine what it does cause.
Thank you, Dr. Cross.
Thank you. Does anybody in particular want to talk about the 16 and 17-year-old issue? I think that's an important one to get settled, because it may be affecting how people would like to vote on this.
Yes, This is Ofer Levy. I want to speak to that issue. Is that okay?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
And then Dr. Gans.
Yeah, so a complicated topic, and it can be argued either way. Cody correctly pointed out that the incidence of severe COVID at 16, 17 years of age is not high. On the other hand, we've already heard from Pfizer, and this is quite typical, that if they do eventually want to get a pediatric indication and the end game could look, we don't know, we don't have a crystal ball, but it's possible if you demonstrate safety in pediatrics that eventually you get this as a pediatric vaccine and it's incorporated into the pediatric immunization schedule. That is a very practical model because that's how most vaccines are distributed around the world through the infrastructure of vaccinology. So in terms of achieving population penetration. So the loss, if we take away the 16 and 17-year-olds here, we lose what is the effort to climb down in age eventually, and we might lose one of our tools to eventually really conquer this pandemic. So I'm not so sanguine about removing that group.
Dr. Gans.
Can I respond?
Dr. Meister, go ahead. Yep,
Yes,
go ahead.
Thank you, Ofer. It's a very interesting point. So I think you're suggesting that if the 16 and 17-year-old subjects are not included, then that will delay a approval or authorization for young children? I don't think that's the case. You're muted.
Phone is muted. Okay, hi. It will reduce the amount of information we have about the 16 and 17-year-olds. It will slow down getting the vaccine to them, and if we don't have that information, makes it that much harder to go down in age beyond that. So I'm thinking about what the end game here is for the entire world.
Yes.
What's realistic here, as we know, these viruses don't know national borders. What's realistic is getting vaccines eventually that are safe and effective through the typical vaccine infrastructure in the world. Most vaccines are delivered in early life.
But but we don't know if the benefit outweighs the risk in that 2-year age group, Ofer.
Yeah,
but there were, let me interrupt. There were data in our briefing documents about studies going down to, I think, 12 years of age. If anything, there were larger numbers there than in some of the in the 16 and 17-year-olds. Anybody?
I'm sorry, Dr. Levy, I don't know why are you saying that a vaccine would have to have an emergency use authorization in 16-year-olds when they're not going to be in the group that's going to get the vaccine. They're not going to be prioritized, but they'll continue to be studied in the trial. So I don't see how this interferes with the eventual full licensure for that age group.
I think that's the important point here is like when they come into the phase. I think it's very important to study this group, and I think that we will have ongoing data on them. The question is, does the risk-benefit actually outweigh it at this point? And being a pediatrician, and Ofer knows this very well, I'm obviously a big proponent of any kind of studies that we can get into children, and we certainly need it for herd immunity. But they're not going to be first in line, and I do think we should allow the studies to continue that have been proposed and probably allow the people who have already been vaccinated to actually have full safety data. So I would support not including them in this round.
Other pediatricians? Dr. Sawyer? Did you have something you were?
Yes.
Dr. Chatterjee?
Thank you. I've been trying to get in for a while to put in a word in it.
Yeah, well, it's hard.
I agree completely with what Dr. Gans and Dr. Meissner said. I have the same concern, which is among all the scientific data presented, I thought that the thinnest was for the 16 and 17-year-olds who, if they were eligible under this EUA, would not be granting permission themselves. Their parents are responsible, so they're not making the decision themselves. That decision themselves to get vaccinated or not. The other group I had concerns with was the people who are 75 and older, but because of the very high risk for that group, I think it's reasonable to not put an upper limit on the age, but I too would vote for putting that age limit up to 18 and older.
This is Mark. I would like to just join that lineup of people advocating for that. I think the data is very thin and that it's inadequate to really say we have safety given the low incidence of disease. I know the argument was they're going to be going off to college, but I'm not sure how many are going to receive vaccine between now and then given the staging of release of vaccines. So I would favor delay.
Dr. Rubin, and then I'm going to ask FDA to respond. You're muted.
I'm not a pediatrician, so I say this with some trepidation, but we're looking at lots of subgroups here. And I think we don't want to lose sight of, we're very focused on safety, as we should be, because these are healthy people, but the efficacy is overwhelming for this vaccine. It's very, very strong. And remember that we're going to be voting, if we vote for this, to approve this for Native Americans, and there were very few of those, for nursing home residents, which weren't in the study at all, and we think that it's likely to work as compared, and it's likely to be safe because what we know, there are more 16 and 17-year-olds in the study than there are Native Americans, I suspect, and I'm not sure why we wouldn't want to provide clinicians the option of using those. Some of these kids are working in supermarkets and are going to be AMTs and going to be essential workers. So I hate to take that tool away from clinicians.
Can I comment, Arnold?
Yes, please, and then we want to hear from FDA what they would suggest at this point.
Thank you very much for your comment, Dr. Fink. I think the difference, for example, between American Indians and children is American Indians have a high rate of disease. 16 and 17-year-old children do not have high rates of disease. So it becomes a risk-benefit balance that worries me.
Arnold, at
Okay.
some point, as another pediatrician, I'd like to chime in as the last pediatrician to chime in. Here's what I would say. I think I support the statement actually as written. I think it's never an issue of when do you know everything. The question is when do you know enough. But we certainly know that this vaccine is highly effective for 3 months after dose 1. We know that we have a lot of safety data and can say, as Cody pointed out, that we have at least we don't have a relatively uncommon serious side effect problem. And in terms of safety, we're going to be doing follow-up to make sure that issues like bells or anaphylaxis will be attended to. I mean, the fact of the matter is 16 and 17-year-olds can get this infection, and when they get it, I mean, we've seen certainly reports as well as children in our hospital who have had cardiac anomalies as 16 and 17-year-olds. And if you can prevent this disease safely and effectively, I mean, what we have clear evidence of a benefit, and all we have on the other side is theoretical risk. So I frankly would support this as written, and I agree with Dr. Rubin.
Can I respond to Paul? Arnold, I think.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes, Paul, the rates of Miss-C, at least as far as we know, and as was published in the New England Journal, regarding New York State, the rates of Miss-C were 2 cases per 100,000 people under 20 years of age.
Right, but I'm not just saying this C. I mean, there is also vasculitis that doesn't necessarily meet the operational criteria for Miss-C.
Well, and that is certainly true, but I'm just saying that the rate of disease is so small and we know so little in this age group. It's real. Believe me, we've had them too. But I have a little more trouble justifying it in children who are so unlikely to get disease.
Can we hear somebody from FDA, Doron or Phil,
Amanda's a pediatrician.
comment on this? No, I'd just like to hear what, or Marion, come on.
Okay, this is Marion. So I think, I really don't want to throw in my own opinion on this. I hear the committee's concern. I just think that, as Dr. Fink has discussed earlier on, our laws and regulations do also permit, extrapolations to younger age groups, and we have been, I think, pretty forthcoming even in our briefing document that we would support, an extrapolation. One should also, consider that 16 and 17-year-olds are out there. They may, transmit disease. And the last comment that I wanted to make on this one is really, if the argument is made that 16 and 17 years old are really not the ones who are high risk group and who would get in line to get this disease because they're not within the recommended group. I think you can make the same argument for an 18 to 25-year-old. So to me, I don't find that compelling. I wonder, however, looking at it is 5:30, and Arnold, we have a strategy. I would like, provided that other committee members do no longer want to weigh in, I would like for the committee to really vote on this question as is, to really hear, because we have 23 members, and I would like to see the results, and then we go to next. Arnold, that's my recommendation.
Okay, that is, thank you very much. I was hoping for some direction because we are moving around in circles right now. So we are going to move to the vote. And again, the process is going to be this. We will vote on our computers. The votes will be announced, and then we will have an explanation of vote from those who wish to give an explanation of their vote. Okay? Kathleen, am I correct in the process?
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Monteau. So our members and temporary voting members that you'll be able to see on this slide, excluding the industry representative, will be voting in this meeting. And in regards to the voting process, Dr. Monteau, as you mentioned, you'll read the question for the record, and then afterwards, all members and temporary voting members will cast their vote by selecting one of the voting options, which will include yes, no, or abstain. You'll have 2 minutes to cast your vote after the question is read, and once all of the votes have been placed, we will broadcast the results and read the individual votes aloud for the record. So just please note that you have 2 minutes, the time frame, and you can change your vote within that period of time, but after the vote has closed, all votes will be considered final. So are there any questions related to voting?
Kathleen, can I ask a question? Cody Meissner? Yes.
Please.
I want to vote for this vaccine. I just would like to remove the 16 to 6. I don't want to vote against the EUA just because I'm uncomfortable with 16. Can we modify the wording if this doesn't pass?
I think that's what Dr. Gruber was saying. Marion, would you confirm that?
Yes, I thought we just said we were not going to modify the wording so that we could get to a vote.
I would recommend voting on this question as is for now because we have not heard from all the committee members.
Thank you, Dr. Gruber.
Kathleen, can I ask one last question before we vote? The way
if it's related to the voting process, sure.
Well, it
Only
is,
about the
and-
voting process, not the question. Okay, I think we are going to vote. So,
Great. So let's pull up the voting question on the
Okay.
slide, and Dr. Monto, you can read question for the record.
based on the totality of scientific evidence available, do the benefits of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine outweigh its risks for use in individuals 16 years of age and older? Your vote possibilities are yes or no, and if you want to abstain, you just don't vote. Is that it? Because I thought there was an abstention possibility.
There's an abstain selection. The no vote just shows your name if you haven't made a selection.
Okay, so we have 2 minutes to vote.
Yes, go ahead and please cast your vote.
How do we return the vote to you? Can you see what we've voted?
Yes, once you select the radio button, I can see the vote. Mm-hmm. We have 1 minute remaining. Thirty seconds. Okay, at this time, the 2 minutes is up, so if we could please close the vote and broadcast the results. And I will read the votes aloud for the record. Dr. Moore voted yes. Dr. Cohn voted yes. Dr. Gans voted yes. Dr. Perlman voted yes. Dr. Kurilla voted no. Dr. Rubin voted yes. Dr. Levy voted yes. Dr. Pergam voted yes. Dr. Chatterjee voted no. Dr. Fuller voted no. Dr. Miser abstained. Dr. Sawyer voted yes. Dr. Hildreth voted yes. Dr. Kim voted no. Dr. Monto voted yes. Dr. Tripp voted yes. Dr. Wharton voted yes. Dr. Benacoloke voted yes. Dr. Offit voted yes. Dr. McInnes voted yes. Dr. Lee voted yes. Mr. Taubman voted yes. And that concludes the vote. So we do have a favorable vote, and that concludes this portion of the meeting. So I will now hand the meeting back over to Dr. Monto. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Marion, do you have anything you want to add at this point?
We can't hear you, Marianne.
I apologize, double muted. I just wanted to thank the committee for voting on this very complex topic. I wanted to thank the committee for their discussion and their suggestions. We very much appreciate their input on this very important topic, and we will take what we've heard today into consideration when deciding on not only the EUA issuance here, but also, how to move on in the development of and licensure of this product. Thank you so much.
And therefore, our work for the day is done. I wanted to thank the committee, and I want especially to thank the FDA because they have been laboring long and hard in doing the analysis, dealing with some of the issues such as the recent anaphylaxis episodes. And I will therefore close the meeting, and I believe most of us are going to be revisiting some of these issues in about a week. So thank you very much. Good night, and see you soon.